Hey folks, BlackCross here, and welcome to another video game review. In today's review, I'm going to be talking about Pokemon Legends Arceus. You have no idea how many different ways people pronounce that. Either Arceus, 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 and as far as like official, I believe it is pronounced Arceus. Arceus. So I'm just going to go with the official. I may accidentally say the phrase Arceus, so you'll have to forgive me, because for some reason people have so many different ways of pronouncing it, and at this point I just don't care. But at any rate though, I want to talk about Pokemon Legends Arceus because this has been the game that has interested me the most since its reveal, and I've been interested in wanting to dive into it and see what it's like, just kind of see how it plays out and stuff. And I have to say, everyone is right. It's really good. It's literally is the sequel to the majority of Pokemon games, and one that I feel like Pokemon Company / Nintendo needs to reflect on. This needs to be the solid blueprint on how you should make a Pokemon game. Now, not 100%, but the majority of it, yes, it should be looked at as like the core blueprint to help make future installments of Pokemon and stuff. Now, you might be asking the question, well, what makes this game so great that even you would acknowledge it to be as great, for someone who isn't as big of a Pokemon fan as everybody else, or say like NBC Mekachew? Well, allow me to give you some details. So, right off the back, atmosphere-wise, I absolutely love it. I love the atmosphere. I love the ideal of going to an origin-based ideal of Pokemon and build it up. Just go into an origin where people don't know about Pokemon, people don't know how to respond to them, or how to even work alongside with Pokemon. And that's kind of an interesting ideal concept, because in this game, you are actually building a unified fortress, a pure bond between human and Pokemon. And that's really cool. Ordinarily in games, you wouldn't see that as heavily. In fact, really, you wouldn't see that and feel it as strongly as you would, In most Pokemon games that I have played, I usually go with collect my set team, battle the Elite Four, and then job well done. That's my main goal. But in this game, your goal is slightly different. And even though it's a goal that has carried through every single entry, it doesn't magnify it as much compared to previous entries until now. So what is the main goal of Pokemon aside from collecting data, getting people to work alongside with Pokemon, kind of build the future of Pokemon? What is the main goal? Well, from the very get-go, the main goal is to seek out all Pokemon, capture at least one of every Pokemon, at least have at least one of every Pokemon, and that is the main essential goal from the very get-go. And I have to say, this is actually technically the very first Pokemon game where I've actually went out of my way to collect, catch, and get every Pokemon in existence. Which is maddening to say, I honestly didn't know if I could achieve that, because knowing Pokemon logic and knowing Pokemon ways of doing it and stuff like that is very complex. There's so many different layers of how to catch them, certain ways to get them, and stuff like that, areas and locations and stuff like that. So it's one of those things where it's like I never went out of my way to catch every Pokemon in that game. I've never bothered to try. And again, the reason is because of how complex it is to do that. After say 150 or so, all of a sudden you just look at it and you go, well, how do I do it? How do I do it? And really, my answer would be, you don't. Because you're kind of crazy if you try, And really, the way entries have done it in the past, and even still to this day right now with Scarlet and Violet, the only reason why you couldn't naturally do it was because you had two separate games. You know, you had one set of game that had a set of Pokemon, and then another one that had another set of Pokemon that you could only get in those two games. So that kind of narrows it out of the park. Then you had some Pokemon that can only evolve through trading. There's that. There's Pokemon that only evolve through stones, and there's even some Pokemon that only evolve during day and night cycles, and then there are Pokemon that only evolve when they're happy. How the frick do you know if they're happy? You know, it's like, what? Hang on, where did that mechanic come from? There's so many layers to Pokemon that it's almost impossible to kind of analyze it just at base value. It goes more than just catching them. You know, you have to go deeper in knowledge of like, okay, how do I catch this? How do I attain this? How do I evolve it into this? You know, and in some cases, some Pokemon can evolve into multiple different ones. Eevee's a perfect example. So many complicated ways of how to catch and attain Pokemons that is hard to kind of concentrate and figure out what the goal would be. Like, how do you go about doing it? But Legends Arceus does something that no other Pokemon game has ever done before. And that is this: making a complicated game series simple. Which is unheard of. It's unheard of about making a complex game into something simplistic. How do you make it simple? And the weirdest thing is, the best way they've made it simple is by adding more stuff. And then people all of a sudden go, oh no, now what have they done? But the weird thing is this: it makes it easier. What they do makes it easier. You know, it's weird. So let's go through the list of ways that you could get Pokemon. So first and foremost, catching them normally. Now, there are two ways you can catch them normally. Either the traditional way, which is battling them, or the coolest thing that they have done in this game, which is to stealth catch. Now, the cool thing is too is that there's like 3 different categories of Pokemon. There's the friendly type, which is like Pokemon that walk up to you and just like, oh hey, how's it going? And it's like, this is so surreal. I cannot believe this is happening. Pokemon just walking to me and being like, hello! It's so cool! And then you got some Pokemon that are easily frightened, and if they see or hear you, they'll just run off. And then there's some Pokemon that are intimidated by you, and they will just shred up fight you. They will just fight you right at your face. They don't care if you have a Pokemon or not. They'll just come right at you. It's like, holy shit. But that's so cool because they make it feel more lifelike because of this. They make it feel like as if you are actually in a true world of Pokemon, you know, where you actually either fight or just randomly catch, you know, and that's the cool thing. And the cool thing is, to a certain degree, you could just throw a Pokeball and chances are you will catch it right off the bat. No battling. You just throw a Pokeball and you catch it. Really awesome. But then, of course, other ways, you know, obviously, you still have to battle them and stuff. Get their HP low enough to where you could capture them. And I like that still. I do like that. But then there are other ways you can catch Pokemon. And that's where it gets a little weird. Not weird bad, but weird as in like, I didn't think they would do this. So, in the story of the game, your character comes from a time rift. A time rift that is broken. And obviously you have to fix it, but as to how is unknown at the moment. But you just you're there. But that space-time continuum is broken as well throughout the entire realm. And so every once in a while there'll be a space-time distortion area that appears. And when that happens, mass Pokemon outbreaks can happen. And that's one of the ways you can catch Pokemon you ordinarily couldn't catch, which I find to be awesome, you know? It's like certain Pokemons that you would ordinarily have to get either through trading or evolving and stuff like that could show up in these space-time continuum type things, which is cool because it's like all of a sudden you're right in that area and all of a sudden, oh hey look, there's a Pokemon that isn't supposed to be here. So that's cool. Then there's also massive outbreaks of random Pokemon that can show up. And depending on the Pokemon, could be that Pokemon you're looking for that you ordinarily couldn't get. Like one of the 3 base starters that You know, if you chose, like, say, Cyndaquil, but you didn't get the other two, you could still have a chance to get the other two later on through these massive outbreaks. And then, even still, depending on the massive outbreak, you could fight their evolved forms. So that makes collecting them a lot more simplistic in the terms of like, oh hey, missed your chance on getting some of the starters? Don't worry, later on in the game, they'll be everywhere. They'll be everywhere, which is, I love that. I love that they don't restrict you of certain ones. You can pretty much catch anything, which is cool. I love that. Some, you still have to battle them, but for the most part, you can just capture them all. It's not a big issue. And then, of course, later on I found out that there are some Pokemon, if they're in their Alpha variant, they can sometimes be their evolved forms. For example, yes, you can capture an Abra, and in some ways it's actually easier than you normally would have, you know? In most ways, if you're lucky enough to be faster than the Abra itself, you just put it to sleep and then you can catch it. But that's still hard to do. But now, with this game, you can either throw food or throw a heavy object at that Pokemon, stunning them a little bit, and then throw a Pokeball, and then you can catch them, making it instantly easier. But what's even cooler is the fact that I actually encountered an Alakazam. An Alakazam can only be attained by evolution, you know, from Kadabra to Alakazam, but that can only be done through trading. But there was an alpha variant of Alakazam, and I was like, oh, that makes things so much easier. I don't have to worry about trading or anything like that. I can just capture them out in the wild. That's cool. You can still capture alphas. Are they harder to attain? Yes, they are, but at least you don't have to worry about grinding in order to get it to evolve and stuff. But that's even another thing too, the fact that you can still go through that grind and you can still evolve them without actually being online at all. Yes, you don't have to do any online trading, which is insane because they created an item that you can either purchase by using merit points or by achieving side quests and stuff like that, where it's like a set of link cables. Give it to that Pokemon and they'll just straight up evolve. Simplistic! And then other Pokemons that ordinarily could only evolve when they hold an item and then you trade them, you could just give them that item and they'll instantly evolve, which is awesome. I love that. I love the fact that they make it easier to attain Pokemon that ordinarily you couldn't get. Yes, you have to go through a couple of different hurdles, but at least compared to what you normally would have had to have done, it's not as bad. You could actually attain every single Pokemon in one game, and that has never been done in a single Pokemon entry until now. Now, of course, all that's cool and all that stuff, but there's so many different layers about this game that makes it easier or makes it interesting, because there's technically the Pokédex. Now, you can just either flat out catch them or fight them and stuff like that, and you can complete the Pokemon entry then. Or you could do other achievements. Some achievements actually give out double points, and you don't even have to do everything. You can just do certain ones and then complete it, you know? Once you get it to level 10, then you don't have to worry about it. Some requires 1 point, some requires 2 points, and it's actually easier to complete the Pokédex entry. And I like that. I like the fact that you can actually have an easier time completing the Pokédex, and it's not a big deal. I really like it. It's really fun. It makes you want to experiment with other Pokemons just to see what they're like, what their fighting style's like. And ordinarily you wouldn't do that. Ordinarily, unless you were a big enough Pokemon fan, you wouldn't even consider catching every Pokemon and using every Pokemon. You know, you wouldn't do that. But in this game, it'll basically encourages you to try out all the different Pokemons just to see what they do. It kind of encourages you to be more invested with Pokemon, and it makes it easier. It makes it easier to do that, and I like that. I like that a lot. Now, of course, in some Pokemon games, if you capture mass numbers of the same Pokemon, sometimes they won't do anything, sometimes they'll do something, but depending on how many you capture of one Pokemon, and you will end up catching more than one of the same Pokemon, you can just release that number, and if you release them, they will give you items. These items will be used to increase your stat level, and depending on your stat level will depend on the increase that you will get. So in a way, it's kind of like the old ways of EV leveling, but slightly different, but a little bit more simplistic, in the sense of like, oh, depending on who you capture and who you release, depends on the item that you're going to get, and you can use it to increase the power of your Pokemon and their levels and stuff. And I like that. I really like that. It goes beyond just experience share and rare candies and stuff like that. It's another layer just to increase the power of your Pokemon, but a little bit more simplistic way of looking at it, you know? And I like that. There's also traveling, you know, the way you travel the open world and stuff like that. You have different Pokemons that you will later on encounter that will help you travel around. You have the Remdir, you have the Luna Ursa, and then of course you have some of the other ones, some of the more deeper ones, like for example the Sneasel that can climb up the mountains. You have this bird Pokemon, which I can't think of the name, that helps you fly around the area, and then this fish Pokemon that can help you get through the oceans and stuff like that. The different ways of traveling makes it so much more immersive and gives you that immersive feel that you ordinarily wouldn't feel in any traditional Pokemon game in the terms of how you feel it, you know? It does really well in execution. But I think one of the biggest things that I love about Pokemon Legends Arceus is the fact that it actually has actual bosses. Now, ordinarily, the way they would turn these Pokemon into bosses would be some kind of gimmick. Like, for example, the Treliza element, and then in the last entry you had the Gigantamax and all that stuff. And those are okay, but I think I like the Frenzy Pokemon better. Or at least the way they've done this, because here's what's interesting. Your Pokemons don't fight them. You do. And that makes it interesting. You are fighting the Pokemon. You are trying to dodge the attacks in order to gauge your Pokemon against them. And even whenever you successfully beat one part of his HP, you then have to survive through a cycle of trying to survive and try not to die against these frenzy Pokemon. It makes it so engaging, and something that I don't think we'll ever see again in another Pokemon entry. I love it! I love the fact that you actually get to fight these Pokemon. Yes, it's more of dodging, but that's still cool. The fact that you're actually fighting them in mid-combat. You know, you're trying to survive long enough to where you could stop them. That is so cool to me. I love that. That is so awesome, the way they just make that work. And it's just like, holy shit, that's genius. That's so genius. Oh my gosh. And it carries over not just to frenzy Pokemon, but to some legendaries as well, as you will later on be able to attain some of these legendary Pokemon. Some of them require a little bit of layer of like catching them in a certain way. Some of them require you chasing them down and stuff. But it's still so interactive, and it makes it so much more engaging than it has ever done, I feel like. It does really, really well. One other element that I want to go ahead and add, and I almost forgot about this, is the fact of the moveset. In previous Pokemon entries, whenever you have a moveset, you're usually just replacing the move and stuff like that. But in this game, when you learn a new moveset, it just saves in a reserve. And you can choose to change the moveset of your Pokemon later on. So in other words, if it attained a new move, you can change it out and stuff. You don't have to forget a move. You don't have to be like, have to compromise and kind of balance it out and stuff. No. You can just go back into the menu and just pick the move that you want for your set Pokemon. It's that easy. You can purchase new moves later on. You can earn different moves. And you can mix and match the moves in order to make your Pokemon more versatile, or make them straight up however way you want to. It's more customizable for your Pokemon in terms of the moveset. And I love that. That's one of my favorite things about this game. I love it. Just the fact that you can change the moves is a mind-blowing thing to see in a Pokemon game. Whenever I first saw this, I was like, holy shit, this changes everything. And it's just, again, it is so cool to see that. I love how easy it is to get into this game. I love how they make it so well averse, and you don't even have to do some of the most mundane stuff to make it work. Something as simplistic as like, oh, being able to evolve a Pokemon through trading. No trading, just give them the item and they'll evolve. Want a stone? You don't have to worry about looking for a stone. You don't have to worry about purchasing them. Just collect enough merit points and then purchase the stone that you need. I love that part. Wanting to stop a Pokemon from evolving by mashing B all the time and stuff like that? No worries. You can just let them not evolve. Yeah, you can just let them not evolve, and when you feel like you want them to evolve, you could just go to the menu and select evolve. Holy shit! All the stuff that they do, every little thing that they have done in this game, makes it work. Makes it actually work. And it almost makes it a perfect Pokemon game. The top tier, perfect Pokemon game. So why am I hesitating? Well, there are a few things that prevent it from being the best of the best. For example, yes, the game can be a little bit unpolished would be the term. For example, there are some water elements that makes it a little bit disoriented. For example, whenever you're out in the beach area, in the oceans and stuff like that, and you try to capture a Pokemon by throwing the Pokeball and stuff like that, it's a little disoriented to see. It's a little disoriented to watch it. It kind of throws you off. It's kind of like, ugh, kind of ugly to look at, you know? It's one of those things where it's like, I would argue and say that, yeah, that could have been better. And in some ways, I love the fact that you can just mass fight a army of Pokemon. That is so cool to me. You can fight upwards to 5. Is it challenging? Yes, it is, but it's still cool that that is there. But there are certain Pokemon that don't team up, and it kind of makes it a little bit, still a little annoying that I can't just mass fight them all the time. But I guess in the sense of like some Pokemons don't cooperate well with other Pokemon, I guess I can understand that. It only works more so if you have more of the same Pokemon fighting alongside each other, and not like massively different Pokemon fighting with each other and stuff like that. I guess I can understand that, but that's still kind of annoying to me. But the biggest thing, and unfortunately that's what makes it prevent it from being the best Pokemon game ever, is that technically there are 2 Pokemon that can be attained, but only if you have save data. So NBC Mekachu mentioned this to me, and that there are 2 legendary Pokemons that can be only attained if you have save data from Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, and or Sword and Shield. If you have those save data from those 4 games, you can get these 2 legendary Pokemon. Now, record, they don't count towards the main journal entry, they don't count towards the main Pokedex entry, which is fine, I guess. I guess that's okay. It doesn't prevent you from achieving the end goal and stuff. But it sucks that, you know, in the game, it's somewhere in the data, you can in fact attain these 2 Pokemon. But you cannot attain them unless you have the save data of certain Pokemon games. That to me still kind of irks me just a tiny bit. It's like we're so close to having it almost perfect, and then Pokemon Company could not resist and say, oh, you want all of them? Well, you're gonna have to purchase all of our other previous titles to do it. I mean, again, it's probably because of the fact that I'm not that big of a Pokemon fan, which is understandable. I mean, Sword and Shield is the one exception to the rule because it's not just selected Pokemons. You also have different gym leaders that you could fight and stuff like that. That gives it a little bit of variety, but it's one of those things where it's like, I would prefer all the Pokemons, all of the available options to be available in one game, and I don't have to do any weird, stupid loophole thing just to get them. Like save datas. That to me, I feel like is just a little bit of a stab in the shoulder, and it's like, do you have to do that? Do you have to make it to where I have to have that? And it's like, like I said, it's almost a perfect game because every Pokemon is attainable in some form of way. Either by giving them an item, or finding them out in the wild, doing some weird thing, it can still be possible to attain them, and this makes it so easier to do it. You don't have to have multiples of the same games. You don't have to have multiple systems. You don't have to have somebody that has the game to do it. You can do it by yourself. You can just be by yourself. It could be the perfect Pokemon single player game, and it would be perfect. It's almost... The Pokemon Company could not resist that. They could not resist that. And unfortunately, that's what kind of hurts it for me, is that unfortunately there is a small thing in which where they do require you to have other additional Pokemon games. And if you're a solid Pokemon fan, you probably already got these titles, so it won't be a big deal. But if you're like me and you don't play every Pokemon game and you don't have every single one, yeah, that can still kind of hurt. And to me, that kind of bugs me. I kind of wish they wouldn't do that, you know. But I guess that's just me. I would say Pokemon Legends Arceus is my favorite Pokemon entry to date based on this generation alone. We've had multiple generations of Pokemons, and I have to say, I've not had many favorite Pokemon games. You know, when I say favorite, I mean like all-time favorites. I would go back to it 100 times, and I would tell you I would play it over and over and over again. You know, there's Pokemon Emerald. I love Pokemon Emerald. I played Ruby and Sapphire, but then I played Emerald and loved Emerald, obviously, for all the additional stuff that they did and stuff like that. And then there's Pokemon Colosseum. I love Colosseum. I did a Let's Play of that. Check that out if you want to. And I love it. I love those two games. And they came from the same generation, you know, Generation 3 technically. And it's just one of those things where that generation to me was the best level of Pokemon. And since then, it's kind of hard to magnify that level because they kind of do the same thing, except make it a bigger list. A list that makes it less and less enduring about wanting to collect all the Pokemons and stuff. And I guess for me, I just never bothered to try because there's just too many of them. So why would I bother? And yet, Legends Arceus, I did it. I finally did it. Legend Arceus makes it to where catching every Pokemon is fun. And that is something that you can't say. Catching every Pokemon, catching all of them and stuff like that, all the different ones, makes it fun. Heck, there's an entry in this game where you actually capture all of the different unknowns. And it is so cool. I love that. I love everything this game does. It literally is the perfect Pokemon game. And I don't say that much. I don't say that. I liked it Sword and Shield. Technically Shield if you want to be more precise. But I liked it that. I liked it the different Pokemons and stuff like that. But this does so much good that I highly recommend this. If you are a fan of Pokemon, I highly recommend this. Even if you're remotely interested in playing this game, I highly recommend this. Yes, there's a few hurdles that you go through and stuff like that. There's a few things you have to look up and stuff like that. But for the most part, everything can be done through a single playthrough. You don't have to worry about doing anything else. With the exception of the two legendaries, but since they don't count towards the Pokédex entry in order to achieve the final goal and stuff like that, I guess it's okay. It just kind of irks me a little bit. But again, would I give this a 5 out of 5? I actually want to. And you know what? I'm going to. I'm going to give this a 5 out of 5. And do you want to know why? You want to know why? Because depending on how my experience is with Scarlet and Violet, I want Pokemon Company to look back on this game and realize this is the one. This is their blueprint. This is what they need to grow upon. This is what they need to have in their game. Everything that Pokemon Legends Arceus does is better than what every other previous Pokemon game have done to date. They have perfected the element. They have perfected it to a T, and it is perfect. Highly recommend this. Definitely a 5 out of 5. I don't care if anyone disagrees with me on that one. If you are remotely interested in Pokemon, dive into this. You will not regret this. This is a definite buy. I promise you on that one. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. And again, highly recommend this game. Absolutely love it. I am planning on playing Pokemon Scarlet and Violet later on. Obviously, that'll be later on through the year and stuff like that, but I do plan on playing that. It's going to be interesting how that turns out. Let's just hope it's as good as what I've been hearing, I hope. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. This is BlackCross signing off. Catch you guys later.